In 2021, a peer-reviewed archaeological journal published a luminescence analysis dating a 14-acre complex of stone cairns, walls, and terraces on a hillside in Berks County, Pennsylvania, to approximately 570 BC. That is 2,500 years ago. That is older than the Roman Republic. For decades, when people asked archaeologists about the stone structures scattered across eastern Pennsylvania, the answer was the same. Farmers built those. Farmers were not in Pennsylvania in 570 BC. That is not the only structure on this list that mainstream archaeology got wrong. There is a rock shelter 27 miles from Pittsburgh that turned out to be 19,000 years old. There are over 300 petroglyphs in the Susquehanna River that were not systematically recorded until 2002. There are V-shaped stone structures in the river that may predate the pyramids of Giza. And there was a burial mound in McKee's Rocks that was the most impressive ancient structure in the state, until someone quarried it for road gravel. Like this video if you have ever walked past a pile of rocks in the woods and assumed someone was clearing a field. Subscribe, because Pennsylvania is much older than anyone told you. Number 12. The Susquehanna Stone Eel Weirs. Before the Egyptians built the pyramids of Giza, Native Americans were building giant V-shaped stone structures in the Susquehanna River. Welcome to the architecture that predates civilization as you learned it. These are eel weirs, stone fishing structures built from stacked river rocks to funnel migrating American eels into narrow channels where they could be trapped or speared. The largest known weir, near Danville, is approximately 1/8 of a mile wide at the open end of the V. The walls rise 3 to 5 feet from the river bottom. Comparable eel weirs in Maine have been radiocarbon dated to approximately 4,000 BC. That is 6,000 years ago. The pyramids of Giza were built around 2,500 BC. A high school environmental science teacher named Van Wagner grew up seeing a mysterious V from Bald Top Mountain above the Susquehanna. He used Google Earth and drone footage to document dozens of them. The river is described as chock full of ancient stone traps. Only 10 have been formally recorded in the entire state. A high school teacher found 6,000-year-old structures on satellite imagery that professional archaeologists had not cataloged. Number 11. Hickory Run Boulder Field in Carbon County. This is the one entry on this list that nobody built. That is what makes it the strangest. Welcome to 16 acres of Unexplained. Hickory Run Boulder Field is 400 feet by 1,800 feet of sandstone boulders, with no vegetation, no soil, and some rocks up to 26 feet across. Created approximately 20,000 years ago by periglacial freeze-thaw cycles. A creek runs beneath the tightly packed rocks. Dense forest surrounds the field on all sides, but nothing grows on the field itself. Scientists agree on the general mechanism. What they cannot fully explain is why the field is so flat across the tips of countless boulders, despite no human grading. National Natural Landmark since 1967. Walking onto the boulder field feels like stepping onto another planet. The forest stops. The rocks begin. No transition. If structures built by humans are mysterious, a structure built by glaciers that looks more engineered than anything humans on this list produced is terrifying. Number 10. Parker's Landing Petroglyphs in Armstrong County. There are ancient carvings in the Allegheny River that only appear when the water drops. The rest of the year, they are underwater. Welcome to the art gallery that hides itself. The Parker's Landing petroglyphs are part of a network of at least 4 petroglyph sites along the Allegheny River in Venango, Armstrong, and Clarion counties. The carvings are on river rocks that spend most of the year submerged. They only emerge during summer low water months. Here is the question that nobody has answered. Did the people who carved these images know the carvings would be underwater most of the time? Were water levels different centuries ago? Or were these images meant to be hidden, revealed only when the river decided to show them? The carvings were made by non-Iroquoian peoples. The Iroquois did not practice petroglyph carving, so these carvings predate Iroquois dominance of the region. Ken Burkett, a Carnegie Museum volunteer field associate since 1979, has documented the sites. The carvings exist. They appear and disappear with the seasons. Nobody knows if that was the plan. Remember the eel weirs at number 12, the stone structures the river hides most of the year? The Allegheny is doing the same thing with its petroglyphs. Pennsylvania's rivers are keeping secrets the way Pennsylvania's archaeologists kept silence. Number 9. The Bushkill Stone Walls in Pike County. Near the Delaware Water Gap, someone built stone walls of gray slate with white quartzite cobbles placed on top for decoration. Farmers do not decorate their field walls. Welcome to the wall that should not be pretty. Norman Mueller, a researcher with the New England Antiquities Research Association, documented stone walls near the Delaware Water Gap Visitors Center that were unlike anything built for agriculture. The walls were constructed of carefully stacked slate pieces, and on top, at regular intervals, large water-rounded cobbles of quartzite had been placed. Mueller described them as contrasting color-wise with the gray of the shale and sandstone. That is not functional. That is aesthetic. Farmers clearing rocks from fields do not sort by color. They do not place decorative cobbles at intervals on top of walls they built for utility. Someone built these walls and cared about how they looked. That is not agriculture. That is architecture. And architecture implies intention. Intention implies culture. And culture implies a tradition that mainstream archaeology spent 70 years saying did not exist. The quartzite cobbles are white against gray slate. The contrast is visible. The builders wanted you to see it. The archaeologists decided not to look. If decorated walls near the Delaware Water Gap seem implausible, the next entry involves the largest ancient structure in western Pennsylvania. It was destroyed for road gravel. Number 8. The McKees Rocks Burial Mound in Allegheny County. The most impressive example of ancient Indian architecture in modern Pennsylvania was 16 feet high, 85 feet wide, and built by the Adena people approximately 2,200 years ago. Then someone quarried the bluff it stood on for municipal paving stone. Welcome to the monument that became a road. The McKees Rocks Burial Mound stood on a bluff overlooking the Ohio River at the confluence of Chartiers Creek, 4 miles west of downtown Pittsburgh. It was hand-built by the Adena people between approximately 200 BC and 100 AD, later used by the Hopewell and then the Monongahela cultures. 3 construction layers, 3 civilizations, 1 mound. In 1896, Frank Garadet of the Carnegie Museum excavated the site. 33 burials, stone and bone tools, pearl beads, conch shell beads from the Atlantic coast, meaning these people had trade networks spanning hundreds of miles, copper artifacts, pottery, 1 skeleton, a woman designated burial 20, measured over 6 feet 6 inches. Garadet's field notes state the person could not have been less than 6 foot 6 inches high. The excavation was conducted without consulting any tribal governments or indigenous groups. That was 1896. The artifacts were taken to the Carnegie Museum, where they remain today on Baum Boulevard. And then the mound was destroyed. The bluff beneath it was quarried for rock to pave municipal streets. Slowly, over years, the most impressive ancient structure in western Pennsylvania was ground into road gravel. The mound that 3 civilizations built over 2,000 years was eliminated to fill potholes. A Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission marker was erected in 2002 near Rangers Field in McKees Rocks. That is all that remains, a sign where a monument used to be. Here is the thing about McKees Rocks that makes it different from every other entry on this list. The other structures were ignored. This one was studied, documented, cataloged, and then destroyed anyway. The Carnegie Museum has the pearl beads. The city has the road gravel. The Adena people have a historical marker. The Mound Society of Western Pennsylvania has advocated for the return of the remains and the preservation of the site. The site is a parking lot adjacent to a playing field. The most impressive ancient structure in the state is under asphalt. Remember the eel weirs at number 12 that only 10 have been formally recorded. McKees Rocks was formally recorded, formally excavated, formally published, and then formally destroyed. Being studied did not save it. Being ignored is not the only way to lose a monument. Sometimes the professionals find it, take what they want, and let the bulldozers finish. Would you drive on a road paved with the gravel of a 2,200-year-old burial mound? You probably already have. If you've made it this far, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free, and we bring new videos about our state. Number 7. The Lehigh Valley Stone Cairns in Northampton, Monroe, and Berks counties. A 7-Up truck driver spent years mapping stone mounds across eastern Pennsylvania that nobody would study. A Temple University archaeologist confirmed the stones had to be carried by hand. Nobody knows who carried them or why. Welcome to the mystery that a delivery driver solved on his lunch break. Fred Werkheiser drove a 7-Up truck through rural eastern Pennsylvania. On his routes through Northampton and Monroe counties, he started noticing stone cairns on forested hillsides. Mounds of deliberately stacked stones. Not random, not scattered, patterned. He developed an eye for spotting them. He canvassed forests on his own time. He went to libraries and bookshops looking for answers. He eventually connected with researchers studying similar sites in Berks County. One Berks County site covers 12 to 14 acres of hillside, 12 to 14 acres of stone mounds that someone built by hand. Dr. Michael Stewart of Temple University examined the sites and noted a critical detail. There were no old cart paths on the properties, no evidence of wheeled transport. That means every stone in those cairns was carried by hand. A considerable undertaking, as the academic literature politely describes it. And when Werkheiser tried to get professional archaeologists interested, Mountain Home magazine reported that architectural historians seemed indifferent to his questions. Translation: a truck driver found what the professionals missed, documented what the professionals would not, and was ignored by the professionals when he asked for help. The cairns do not align with colonial property lines. They are in forests where no farming occurred. No cart paths mean hand transport, and the professional response was indifference. Here's the thing about Fred Werkheiser. He is not an archaeologist. He is not a professor. He drove a 7-Up truck, and he did more to document the stone cairns of eastern Pennsylvania than the entire professional archaeological establishment. That is not a compliment to Fred Werkheiser. It is an indictment of everyone else. Remember the Bushkill Walls at number 9, where someone cared enough to decorate? The Lehigh Valley cairns show the same pattern. Someone cared enough to carry stones by hand across 14 acres. That is not field clearing. Field clearing is dumping rocks in the nearest low spot. This is construction, and nobody has dated it. If you have made it this far, please consider liking the video and subscribing. It is completely free, and we bring new content about Pennsylvania's hidden history regularly. If a truck driver mapping stone mounds across eastern Pennsylvania sounds like the beginning of a pattern, the next entry is a 22-foot boulder on the Allegheny River that the French recorded in 1749. Number 6. Indian God Rock in Venango County. In 1749, French explorers found a boulder on the Allegheny River covered in ancient carvings. Their native guides treated it with sacred reverence. It has 55 petroglyphs. It has been on the National Register since 1984. Nobody knows exactly who carved it or when. Welcome to the rock that has been asking questions for 275 years. Indian God Rock is a massive sandstone boulder on the banks of the Allegheny River. 22 feet long, 14 feet wide, 10 feet tall. One face slopes at approximately 50 degrees, facing west. That sloping face is covered in 55 or more ancient petroglyphs, animals, human figures, abstract symbols. The carvings were first documented in writing in 1749 by the French expedition of Pierre-Joseph Céloron de Blainville, who was traveling down the Allegheny to claim the Ohio Valley for France. A member of the expedition wrote that the Native American guides regarded the rock with superstitious reverence. That word, superstitious, tells you more about the French than it does about the guides. The guides recognized something sacred. The French called it superstition. The petroglyphs are estimated to date between 900 AD and 1750 AD. They were carved by non-Iroquoian peoples, since the Iroquois did not practice petroglyph carving. Who specifically carved them, when and for what exact purpose, remains debated. Many of the symbols have no agreed interpretation. Here is the catch. Indian God Rock has 55 ancient petroglyphs. It also has hundreds of modern graffiti carvings, names and dates from the 1800s to the present, carved right over the ancient images. The irony is staggering. Ancient peoples spent 20 minutes per dime-sized impression painstakingly pecking symbols into stone with cobble hammers and quartz chisels. Tourists in the 1800s carved their names over those symbols in minutes with pocket knives. The care of the original carvers and the carelessness of the graffiti exist on the same rock. That rock is accessible via the Allegheny River Trail, approximately 4 miles from the Belmar access point in Franklin. It has been on the National Register of Historic Places since 1984, and the graffiti is still there. Remember McKee's Rocks at number 8, the mound that was studied and then destroyed. Indian God Rock was studied, registered, and then defaced. Pennsylvania's ancient structures do not need to be discovered. They need to be protected from the people who already found them. Number 5. The Delaware and Lehigh Valley Stoneworks across eastern Pennsylvania. In March 2026, a National Heritage Corridor published an article saying that mainstream archaeology spent 70 years claiming indigenous peoples in Pennsylvania never built anything in stone. The cairns, walls, and chambers across eastern Pennsylvania disagree. Welcome to the institutional reckoning. The Delaware and Lehigh National Heritage Corridor published an article in March 2026 titled Unraveling the Mystery of Pennsylvania's Stoneworks. The opening line is a direct challenge. Since the mid-20th century, mainstream archaeology would have us believe that indigenous peoples who lived in what is today Pennsylvania did not practice a stone building tradition of any kind, other than the manufacture of stone tools and implements. Read that again. For 70 years, the official position was that the indigenous peoples of eastern Pennsylvania, who lived here for thousands of years, never stacked a single stone on top of another stone for any purpose other than making tools. While stone building traditions were documented across the American West, the Arctic, the Southeast, the Midwest, and even western Pennsylvania, eastern Pennsylvania was somehow the one place in North America where nobody built anything in stone. The DNL article points this out explicitly. It asks the obvious question that nobody in a position of authority asked for 7 decades. And across eastern Pennsylvania, the evidence has been sitting there the entire time. Stone cairns on forested hillsides, walls with decorative elements, underground stone chambers with corbelled ceilings found on remote hillsides where no farmstead ever existed. When residents of Upper Dauphin County tried to report stone structures to archaeologists, the response was farmers built those. End of conversation. That quote comes from a commenter on the PA Historic Preservation blog. Farmers built those is not an archaeological assessment. It is a refusal to investigate. It is a conclusion reached without evidence, which is the opposite of how science works. The PA State Archaeological Record contains only 35 sites classified as ambiguous stone constructions. 35 across the entire state. And the classification itself did not even exist until recently. There was no category for these structures because the discipline had decided they did not exist. You cannot find what you have already decided is not there. The DNL article calls this a little recognized mystery. That is diplomatic. A more honest description would be a 70-year institutional failure to do the job archaeology exists to do. Investigate, date, document, explain. They did none of it. Number 4. The Oley Hills Stone Complex in Berks County. A 14-acre stone complex on a hillside near Reading was scientifically dated to 570 BC. That is 2,500 years ago. For decades, archaeologists said farmers built it. Farmers were not in Pennsylvania in 570 BC. Welcome to the structure that broke the consensus. The Oley Hills Stone Complex sits on a wooded ridge east of Reading. 14 acres of stone cairns, walls, curved row platforms, terraces, and other formations spread across a forested hillside. Some cairns are flat-topped. Some are built onto bedrock outcrops incorporating natural boulders. Walls curve and follow the terrain. The complex was described by researchers as, some would say, artistic. A luminescence analysis published in the peer-reviewed journal North American Archaeologist dated the structures to approximately 570 BC. That places them in the range of the Adena culture, a pre-Columbian civilization centered in the Ohio River Valley, known for earthworks and burial mounds. If the Adena connection is confirmed, it extends that culture's reach much farther east than previously documented. Here is what 570 BC means in context. The Roman Republic was founded in 509 BC. The Buddha was alive. Confucius was born around 551 BC. The Greeks were building early temples, and someone in what is now Berks County, Pennsylvania, was constructing a 14-acre complex of stone cairns and terraces on a wooded ridge. For decades, mainstream archaeologists said these structures were field-clearing piles. They said farmers stacked rocks to get them out of the way. Nobody dated them. Nobody excavated them. Nobody tested the hypothesis. And when someone finally did, the date came back as 570 BC, over 2,000 years before the first European farmer set foot in Pennsylvania. The hypothesis was not just wrong. It was refuted by the first test anyone bothered to run. Picture this. You are standing on a wooded hillside east of Reading. Stone cairns emerge from the undergrowth. Walls curve along the terrain. A terrace steps down the slope. The trees are old. The light filters through canopy. The structures have been here for 2,500 years. They are older than the Roman Republic, and until 2021, the official explanation was that a farmer put them here. You are standing next to something that was ancient when Julius Caesar was born, and the experts called it a pile of field rocks. Remember Fred Verkeyser at number 7, the truck driver who found cairns nobody would study? The Oley Hills complex is what happens when somebody finally studies them. Number 3, the Safe Harbor Petroglyphs in Lancaster County. There are over 300 ancient carvings on rocks in the Susquehanna River. Some are serpents that align with the sun on the solstice. Some are human figures with mysterious orbs above their heads. They are the largest concentration of petroglyphs in the northeastern United States. Most people in Lancaster County have never seen them. Welcome to the sacred landscape, hiding in plain sight. The Safe Harbor petroglyphs are carved into 7 rocks along the Susquehanna River below Safe Harbor Dam. Over 300 individual images recorded by the Coneohela, Chapter 28 of the Society for Pennsylvania Archaeology in 2002. Thunderbirds, serpents whose bodies align with the rising sun at solstices and equinoxes. 4-legged animals that may represent clan totems. Deer, turkey, bear, elk. Human stick figures crowned by mysterious orbs that no researcher has definitively interpreted. Concentric circles and cupules, small round depressions carved into stone whose exact purpose remains unknown. Each image was painstakingly pecked into rock using a river cobble as a hammer and a piece of quartz as a chisel. Experimental archaeology suggests approximately 20 minutes of labor per dime-sized impression. 20 minutes of deliberate, careful work for each tiny mark. The 300-plus carvings represent thousands of hours of focused effort. These were not casual marks. These were not prehistoric graffiti. Nobody carves graffiti with a stone chisel for 20 minutes per letter. The locations were likely sacred places for communication with the supernatural, according to Lancaster County Magazine. The serpent alignments with solstices and equinoxes suggest astronomical knowledge embedded in the carvings. The people who made them were tracking the sun across seasons and encoding that knowledge in stone. The first written record of these petroglyphs dates to 1863. They were not systematically recorded until 2002. That is 139 years between knowing they existed and properly documenting them. 139 years. Kayak tours to the petroglyphs are available through Shanksmere Outfitters in Wrightsville, guided by Paul Niven. The carvings are best viewed at sunrise or sunset, when the sun hits the rock at a low angle, and the carved impressions cast shadows. Picture this. You are kneeling on a boulder in the middle of the Susquehanna River at sunrise. The water moves around you. The sun is low, and as the light rakes across the rock surface, shadows appear in shapes that were not visible a moment ago. A serpent, its body aligned perfectly with the rising sun. A thunderbird, a human figure with something above its head that nobody can explain. These images have been here for centuries. The river flows over them, the sun illuminates them, and you are looking at the largest concentration of petroglyphs in the northeastern United States, in a state where most people have never heard of them. The serpent aligns with the solstice. The carvings were there before Lancaster County existed, and it took 139 years for anyone to count them. Number 2. Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Washington County. A farmer found artifacts in a groundhog hole in 1955. 18 years later, an archaeologist showed up. The site turned out to be 19,000 years old, the oldest evidence of human life in the Americas. 27 miles from Pittsburgh. Welcome to the groundhog hole that rewrote human history. Albert Miller was a farmer in Avella, Washington County. In 1955, he noticed curious objects in a groundhog hole on his property near Cross Creek. He kept them. He waited. Nobody came. In 1973, 18 years later, Dr. James Adovasio of the University of Pittsburgh arrived to excavate. What he found beneath the sandstone overhang would challenge everything the archaeological establishment believed about when humans arrived in the Americas. The prevailing model, called Clovis First, held that humans crossed from Asia to the Americas approximately 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. Meadowcroft's radiocarbon dates came back at 16,000 to 19,000 years. That was not a minor correction. That was doubling the timeline. The establishment resisted for 25 years. Critics questioned the dating methodology. They questioned contamination. They questioned everything except their own assumptions. The dates held. Additional evidence accumulated. The Clovis First model eventually collapsed under the weight of Meadowcroft and other pre-Clovis sites across the Americas. The rock shelter was right the whole time. Here is what 19,000 years means. The last ice age was still happening. Glaciers covered much of northern Pennsylvania. The people who used this shelter were living at the edge of an ice sheet. The pyramids were 14,000 years in the future. The Roman Empire was 17,000 years in the future. The United States Constitution was 18,800 years in the future. And someone was sitting under a rock overhang along Cross Creek in Washington County, Pennsylvania, making tools and building fires. The site is now a National Historic Landmark and a Pennsylvania Commonwealth treasure. The Heinz History Center manages it. A visitor center was built in 2008. A reconstructed Monongahela culture village from approximately the 1570s sits nearby. You can visit. You can stand under the same overhang. The excavation layers are visible. Time is literally stacked in the dirt, each layer older than the one above it, going back further than any other site in the Western Hemisphere. And it started with a farmer, a groundhog hole, and 18 years of nobody caring. Remember McKee's Rocks at number 8, where the mound was excavated and then destroyed. Meadowcroft was almost never excavated at all. Albert Miller found the oldest evidence of human life in the Americas and waited 18 years for a professional to arrive. The groundhog found the site before the archaeologists did. The groundhog was faster by 18 years. Number 1. The most unexplainable thing about ancient structures in Pennsylvania is not the structures. It is the silence. For 70 years, mainstream archaeology maintained that indigenous peoples in eastern Pennsylvania did not build in stone. That position was not tested. It was not debated. It was not examined. It was simply held, repeated, and used to dismiss every stone cairn, every wall, every chamber, every mound that anyone reported. Farmers built those. End of conversation. And while that conversation was not happening, the evidence sat in plain sight. Stonial weirs in the Susquehanna that may predate the pyramids. A boulder field that has been unchanged for 20,000 years. Petroglyphs that emerge from rivers when the water drops. Decorated stone walls near the Delaware Water Gap. A burial mound in McKee's Rocks that was the most impressive ancient structure in the state before it was quarried for road gravel. Stone cairns across 14 acres of Berks County hillside that were hand-carried into position by people we cannot name. A boulder on the Allegheny River with 55 carvings that French explorers recorded in 1749. Walls, chambers, cairns, and terraces across 6 or more eastern counties that a National Heritage Corridor finally called out in March 2026. A 14-acre stone complex near Reading that came back at 570 BC when someone finally bothered to date it. Over 300 petroglyphs in the Susquehanna that align with the solstice and took 139 years to document, and a rock shelter near Pittsburgh that turned out to be 19,000 years old because a farmer found it in a groundhog hole and waited 18 years for help. The D&L National Heritage Corridor asked the question in March 2026. Indigenous peoples built in stone everywhere else in North America. The American West, the Arctic, the Southeast, the Midwest, even Western Pennsylvania. Why was Eastern Pennsylvania exempted? The article did not provide an answer. Because there is none. The stones were never hidden. The petroglyphs were never buried. The cairns were never secret. A 7-Up truck driver could see them from his delivery route. A high school teacher could find them on Google Earth. A farmer could stumble on them in a groundhog hole. The evidence was always there. The discipline looked away. And looking away is not the same as looking and finding nothing. Looking away is a choice, a 70-year choice. The oldest evidence of human life in the Americas is in a groundhog hole in Washington County. A 14-acre stone complex near Reading was built in 570 BC, and nobody dated it until 2021. Over 300 petroglyphs in the Susquehanna were not systematically recorded until 2002. Stone eel weirs that may predate the pyramids line the river, and only 10 have been formally recorded. The largest burial mound in western Pennsylvania was quarried for road gravel, and for 70 years, the official position was that none of this existed. These 12 structures are real. They are in Pennsylvania, and the most ancient thing about them is not the stones. It is the silence around them. Like this video, if you have ever walked past a pile of rocks in the woods and wondered. Subscribe, because we are coming back with 21 secret places in Pennsylvania that most people have never heard of, including a cave where ice forms in June, a 50,000-acre wilderness that used to be a nuclear research site, and a colony built for Marie Antoinette. The stones have been talking for thousands of years. The only question is whether anyone is ready to listen.